But there's something about Van Gogh's legacy which is much more important than his fathering this or that ism of modern art. Vincent's passionate belief was that people wouldn't just see his pictures, but feel the rush of life in them.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In a previous episode, I mentioned that things take a turn when we go into the month of July, and we're at that turn right now. I'm going to read to you today Theo's letter to his brother, dated 30th of June 1890, so 130 years ago today, which was a Monday. Theo wrote to his brother, and I'm going to go straight to the contents of that letter. Theo writes, "My very dear brother, we've been going through the greatest anxiety. Our dear one has been very ill, but fortunately the doctor, who was anxious himself, said to Joe yesterday, 'You won't lose the child from this.' Here in Paris, the best milk one can get is a veritable poison. Now we're still giving him ass's milk, and that has done him good, but you've never heard anything so painful as this almost continual plaintive crying, lasting several days and several nights, and with us not knowing what to do, and everything we do seeming to aggravate his suffering. It's not that the milk isn't fresh, but it's in the feeding and the treatment of the cows. It's abominable." So Theo doesn't sort of beat around the bush. He starts off saying they are kind of in a terrible situation. They're in dire straits. Their baby is almost like fighting for his life. The doctor actually has to reassure them to say, "Don't worry, you're not going to lose the child from this." He doesn't say what this is. And the focus seems to be on the kind of nutrition they can get. Where's the best milk that they can get? And he's saying that the milk in Paris is like poison. Obviously, when he's referring to ass's milk, he's referring to donkey's milk. And apparently they see that as almost the best remedy. Now you can imagine in this time, 130 years ago, even the best medicine isn't very good medicine. When someone is ill, they really have no idea what to do. They're kind of in the dark. And so when baby Vincent is ill, they don't know what to do, and they're very anxious. And, life expectancy in that time was the low 40s, so mid to low 40s. So you can see that, your life kind of hung on a thread. And you can kind of understand under those situations and circumstances why there would be a desire to drink alcohol, and with death lingering and death hovering over you like a cloud, you can see how it could get the best of one, where one could become very anxious, because you could be alive one moment, dead the next, and we feel some of what that terror is like with the coronavirus. We feel some of that lingering, if not darkening, anxiety, if you know what I'm talking about. It's something that's always there, and you're never really rid of it. And how do you deal with your anxiety? Well, one of the ways Theo does is he writes to his brother, and also that's how Vincent deals with it. He writes to his brother. So I guess the modern version of it is talking to someone, sharing what you're going through, and that may not change everything, but it may make you feel like you're not alone, or that there's someone that you can sort of reach out to. Theo goes on to write, "You can imagine how happy we are that it's going better. Jo has been admirable, as you can well imagine. A true mother, but she has tired herself very much, too much even. May she recover her strength and not have any more ordeals to undergo." Now, he's saying this a month before the great ordeal that'll be Vincent's death. Understood now as a suicide, but whatever it was, the death of Theo's brother would certainly be another ordeal for the family to go through. We get a great deal of validation and reinforcement, and a sense that Jo is a real trooper, a real hero or heroine. That she's just been a great mother, under the circumstances she's been doing really well. This isn't just an empty vote of confidence, not just Jo being a good mom, like any other mom would be a good mom. Jo would eventually have to deal with the death of her husband as well. So she would lose her brother-in-law, and shortly after that her husband. And it was actually Jo who published Vincent's letters, and I think managed to publish them in English very early on. It's actually thanks to Jo that the Van Gogh legacy exists and lives on. Quite an unlikely figure if you think about it. She may have felt very unhappy about these two brothers, but she obviously loved them, and she loved the work, and was a custodian and kind of curator of the letters. So it just shows you she wasn't just a good mother. She also sort of had a maternal, she was kind of the caretaker of the Van Gogh legacy. And can you imagine if Theo married someone else that maybe wasn't that interested in art, or was somewhat illiterate? What could have happened? Theo goes on to write, "At this moment, fortunately, she's sleeping, but she's moaning in her sleep and I can do nothing about it. If only the child, who is also sleeping, might let her sleep for a few hours. Both of them will awake with a smile, I hope. In general, life is hard for her at the moment." So this is a wonderful, if somewhat tragic moment, where you can almost like go back in time 130 years and imagine the sort of nib of Theo's pen scratching on the paper, and somewhere in another room or sort of close by, his young wife is sleeping, and he can kind of hear her sort of making noises in her sleep, obviously noises of distress, and obviously it's a overly tired mother who is thinking about her child, maybe dreaming about her child, dreaming even about losing her child while she's sleeping. I've recently taken custody of a little puppy, and I've had plenty of sleepless nights as well. As I'm sitting here, last night was particularly horrible, and part of that is the puppy, because it's midwinter here, the puppies gets very cold, but you also don't want to sort of turn on him in your sleep and crush him. So you kind of have this disturbed sleep where you, it's kind of an intimate moment, but it's also a moment of anxiety. Is this little animal going to be okay? Now, I know that's totally different with a human being, but it's the same sort of thing where you are stressed by its stress, you are distressed by its struggles, and I've obviously not had it that bad. There's been a little bit of vomiting, when I say a little bit, like one instance or so, and it does concern you. So you can obviously imagine when it's a human child, it is very distressing, and obviously in that time there's not much they can do if things are really bad, so it's kind of like out of their hands. And so you can kind of feel for Jo, who's sort of, even in her sleep, she's sort of making noises, and Theo is feeling helpless. He's feeling very concerned, and there's nothing he can do. What can he do except let his wife rest? What can he do for his child? Just let them both sleep. And he's sort of, you can just get the sense of the ignorance at the time. He has no idea what is wrong with his child, and he's just thinking in the most basic way, well, I hope they wake up with a smile. The same as me hoping the puppy wakes up wagging his tail. One night it sounded like he was choking or something, and then the next morning he vomited something up. It actually looked like it was bloody. I don't know if it was a piece of meat or something, but it was hard to know what was going on. I did take him to the vet, and he seemed absolutely fine, but those kind of things do worry you, definitely do worry you. And so, as I say, this is the beginning of a turn that happens for Van Gogh. He's had a great run in Orvers so far. He's had 1 month that's been quite good. He's just starting to pay attention, I guess, to the lady folk around him, and then this happens. And obviously Van Gogh's a sensitive guy, and he's going to be worried about his brother. He's going to be worried about his little nephew. He's going to be worried about his sister-in-law. And Theo goes on. He says, we don't know what we ought to do. There are questions. Ought we to take another apartment, in the same house on the first floor? Ought we to go to Orvers, to Holland, or not? Ought I to live without worrying about tomorrow, and when I work all day and still don't manage to spare this good Joe from worries about money, since those rats at Boussard and Valadon treat me as if I'd just started working for them and keep me on a leash? So I think you can see that Theo is obviously not just disturbed, he's sort of upset, he's angry. It's a very uncharacteristic letter from him, just him kind of venting a little bit. He refers to some of his colleagues as rats, and is quite indignant about the way they're treating him, that he's like on a leash, and he also refers here quite explicitly to struggling financially. He says, when I'm short of money, must I tell them how things are, and and so on. It's quite a sad letter, given the circumstances he's just explained. His wife moaning in the background, his child ill, and him feeling completely helpless, and he's now venting to his brother. His brother's been quite a weak person. His constitution, and he's sort of offloading a bit to him, sharing some of his deeper feelings to his brother, and you can imagine how Vincent must feel hearing this. That there's quite a serious crisis going on. It's just not just money. It's not just the health of the little baby, but it's like the health of his family. These people that are the closest to him, the people that are probably the nearest and dearest to him in the world. His brother, his sister-in-law, and baby Vincent. They are basically all that he has. They are his family, and now he has to hear this distressing news as he's trying to build his own life. And his brother says, when I'm not calculating without spending on extras and I'm short of money, must I tell them how things are? And if they dare refuse, finally tell them, sirs, I'm taking the plunge and I'm going to set myself up as a dealer on my own account. So Theo is sort of considering making some big changes in his life, taking risks and going on sort of different business ventures. He goes on to say, I think that as I write to you, I'm reaching this conclusion that it's my duty, and that if Ma or Joe or you or I tighten our belts a little, it won't get us anywhere, and that on the contrary, you and I, by moving in the world not as poor down and outs who don't eat, but on the contrary, keeping up our courage and all living buoyed up by a mutual love, we'll go much further, and we'll accomplish our duty and our task with much more serenity than by weighing each mouthful of bread. What do you say to this, old chap? Don't bother your head about me or about us, old chap. Be aware that what gives me the greatest pleasure is when you're well and when you're at your work, which is admirable. You already have too much fire, and we must still be ready for battle a long time from now, for we'll battle all our lives without taking the oats of charity they give to the old horses in grand houses. We'll pull the plough until it moves no longer, and we'll still gaze with admiration at the sun or the moon, according to the time of day. We like that better than being put in an armchair to rub our legs like the old merchant in Orvez. And I think that's a reference to Dr. Gachet. Look, old fellow, do everything for your health. I too will do as much. We have too much in our noddles, meaning your head or your brain, for us to forget the daisies and the freshly stirred clods of earth, and the branches of the bushes that bud in spring, nor the bare tree branches that shiver in the winter, nor the serene skies of limpid blue, nor the big clouds of autumn, nor the uniformly grey sky in winter, nor the sun as it rose above our aunt's garden, nor the red sun setting in the sea at Scheveningen, nor the moon and the stars one fine night in summer or winter. No, whatever happens, that is our possession. Is it enough? No, myself I have, and you will have one day, I hope with all my heart, a wife to whom you can say these things, and I whose mouth is often closed and whose head is often empty. It's through her that the seeds that more than likely come from very far off, but which were passed on by our beloved father and mother, they will perhaps grow, so that I may become at least a man. And who knows if my son, if he may live, and if I can help him, who knows, he may be someone. For your part, you have found your path, old brother. Your carriage is already sturdy and strong, and I myself can glimpse my path thanks to my cherished wife. As for you, calm yourself and rein back your horse a little, so that no accidents occur. And as for me, a flick of the whip from time to time does no harm. Your portrait of Miss Gachet must be admirable, and I'll be pleased to see it. Oh, those little patches of orange in the background. I'm going to leave off the letter right here. There's a small amount to go, another 2 or 3 paragraphs. It's an incredible letter, isn't it? It's full of intensity. It's quite poetic. It's kind of a work of art in terms of some of the words that he uses. By the way, I've been to Scheveningen. It's not far from Den Haag or The Hague. It's sort of a little coastal place. Van Gogh painted boats on the beach there, and the painting sort of flew around and actually got actual beach sand in the oil, and that painting was subsequently stolen and then retrieved, and it's now very valuable. So there's quite a lot of mythology and legend and a legacy around that little place Scheveningen. As we go through July, I might show you some photos. When I went to France, I subsequently went to Holland and visited museums and the home where Van Gogh grew up and so on. So I can take you through that. But this is certainly a letter where Theo is on kind of a hinge of destiny. He's thinking about his child struggling to stay alive. He's thinking about his wife. He's thinking about his life. He's thinking about his brother. He's thinking about the whole arc of existence as it applies to himself, as it applies to people around him, as it applies to his brother. And what is quite generous from him is how he thinks about his brother despite what he's going through. He tells his brother not to worry. He says to his brother, you must do everything for your health. And he says, we've got too much in our minds to forget the daisies. We must we're going to get through this. We've got battles ahead of us. Now, we're going to probably talk about the contents of this letter for the rest of July. But what I can tell you now is the arty-farty scholars point to this letter and they say, this is why Vincent van Gogh killed himself. He read this letter, he was shaken to the core, and he felt, wow, I'm a terrible burden to my brother. I think if I kill myself, it'll solve their problem. I'm not going to be a problem to them. I'm not going to be a financial burden to them. They've got enough struggles already. And so they look at this letter and they say, this is why this was the reason why Van Gogh killed himself. And it is laughable because Van Gogh was a burden when he cut off his ear, or when his ear was cut off. Van Gogh was a burden when he was in the asylum for a year. Van Gogh is a burden right now in terms of the his attempt to reboot his life and asking for art supplies. Now you would imagine that if he did feel like he was a burden, the first thing he would do is say something like, dude, I'm going to either stop painting, or I'm going to stop asking you for art supplies, or I'm going to come and stay with you and help you in some way. I'll I don't know, whatever. But instead, he carries on painting for another month. He carries on ordering art supplies. He carries on being a burden. And I can tell you now, this is jumping a little bit ahead, but in his very last letter to Theo, he makes a very big order of art supplies. Now, why would he do that if he was intending not to be alive anymore? Why would he do that if he felt like he was being a financial burden? Why in his very last letter would he be asking for things that someone would have to pay for if that was the thing that was bothering him? And the other thing is, his brother says to him pertinently, don't bother your head about me or about us, old chap. Be aware that what gives me the greatest pleasure is when you're well and when you're at work, which is admirable. So his brother is saying to him, yes, we're in this difficult place, but what I want you to do is concentrate on you and you getting well, and you must continue working. Isn't that exactly what he did? His brother says, what gives me the greatest pleasure is when you're at work. And he says, that's admirable. This isn't a letter from Theo saying, I can't do this anymore. Vincent, my wife is sick or ill or tired. My child is near death or whatever. I can't do this anymore. You are just too much. I've had enough. He's not saying that. It's a very generous letter from the spirit of Theo. And he talks about his brother you have too much fire, and we must still be ready for battle a long time from now. For we'll battle all our lives. So, it's all about the future. It's about his gripe is with his employer. And he's even talking about, should I move to Orvez? Should I visit Orvez? What should I do? And so I think these people who point to this are just either misinformed, or they have no idea how human nature works, or it is the best story that they can come up with to sell Van Gogh's art. It's a kind of nice sentimental story that fits in with a troubled artist myth. And just how troubled has Vincent been in the last month? If anything, the more troubled Van Gogh has been Theo, because of the illness of his little child. Vincent's been having a great time. He's been going out every day. He's been meeting Miss Gachet and hanging out with the doctor. And compared to his year in the asylum, he's really having a great time. He's in a beautiful environment. He's happy, right? So they say in Afrikaans, daar's geen sprake. It's another way of saying there's just no trace of trouble in Van Gogh's personal circumstance. I'm talking about Vincent. And the only trouble is the sort of darkness not coming from Paris, the health of his family. That is now going to be a little bit of a burden on his mind. His brother is saying, don't you worry about it. I want you to carry on working. I want you to concentrate on your health, right? Obviously, this letter is going to get a reaction from Van Gogh, and we're going to look at that reaction in due course. So he goes on to say in his letter, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce this, but it's the croquet of the landscape makes me think of something very beautiful. And I think he's talking about the landscape that Vincent has been painting and then sending those paintings to his brother in Paris. That's what that references to. And he says, I'll be pleased to see it. Peyron's letter was kind. These people are good sorts after all. Listen soon. When Joe is a bit stronger and the little one recovered, you should come and spend the days here, at least a Sunday and a few days more. The salons are closed but aren't losing much by that, for we'll go together to see the Quast, which decidedly is a fine painting. We'll go and ask him if I may exhibit it on the boulevard in the window, if it's not too big. But it must work, and there'll also be something of yours, old fellow. Come on, and that's with an exclamation mark. You really must be together, for it's you who pointed out this fine Quast painting to me. And so even in the midst of this crisis, this dilemma, this trouble, Theo is talking about art. He is using exclamation marks. He's talking to his brother about painting. That is their passion. That is their life. That's their livelihood. He goes on to say, you really must, hang on, he says, do you remember that I told you that I'd bought that fine painting by Carrot that those, I think it's bastards B&V said wasn't saleable. So he's really riding out against his employers. He goes on to say, Ter Steeg sold it to Mesdag with 5,000 profit, and Mesdag is so pleased with it that he wants others like that. And he's writing to Arnold and Tripp to find him some like that. It pleased me, but B&V will start again tomorrow all the same. Yours, my old brother, the colours are going off. I shake your hand firmly and am pleased that the little one and his mummy are sleeping peacefully. And then he ends off, your Theo. There's a short postscript. He writes, this morning I woke up with the same ideas. It's decided in an unshakable way. When I go out, I'm going to rent that apartment as a start. The kid slept well, and he's well this morning. Adieu. So obviously after writing the letter, there was a tense probably couple of hours, and then eventually the child woke up, and I guess Joe as well, and so it was sort of the dawn of a what felt like a good start that morning, where it seemed like the child had come out of whatever he was in, having regained his full health. So the letter starts in a little bit of a troubled way, but it ends off in a very positive, almost bubbly spirit. It's a very spirited letter from Theo, isn't it? In fact, in all, it's an 8-page letter, although the 8th page is sort of just a few lines at the top of the page, but probably one of Theo's longest letters, if not his longest letter to his brother. And as I said, it's a very memorable, powerful, potent letter. Then on the same day, there was also a letter from Saint-Remy, from Dr. Peyron, and very short letter written on 1st of July. It reads, Dear Sir, not even Dear Vincent. Dear Sir, following your instructions, I'm sending you a postal order for 20 francs, the remainder of the amount that I had in my possession. I see with pleasure that your health continues to be satisfactory and that your life in the midst of this world of artists is spent more pleasantly than here. I shall be happy to hear of your future successes in the various exhibitions in which you will take part. With my sincerest regards, Dr. Peyron. So this is a very ironic little letter. It's a letter that is both validating and reinforcing, and also, endorsing Vincent van Gogh as healthy by the 1st of July. It is also looking to the future and saying, I'm looking forward to you having a pleasant life in the world that you're in now with other artists, and I'll be happy to hear about your future successes. And of course, a month later, he's dead. and these aren't empty sentiments. You could sort of imagine them being empty sentiments, but it's hard to do that given what happened to Van Gogh. I'm talking about his art exploding on the world stage, his art becoming some of the most expensive art in the world, his letters becoming priceless. So these sentiments from Dr. Peyron were well founded in reality. Vincent was about to start an incredible chapter of his life, and so far so good at this point, right? So we will continue the narrative going into July, where, beginning with the response from Vincent van Gogh to his brother, and we'll see how he reacts. We'll see what sort of emotion is involved there. And bear in mind, his brother invites him to come spend a Sunday, I think, or a few days in Paris, and we'll see what the results are of that, and how the health of the family continues to evolve and to change, and what kind of impact this might have on Van Gogh. Thank you for listening. If you haven't subscribed yet to this channel, please do. Like, share, ring the bell for notifications, and I'll see you guys next time.